What's up, everyone? Pittsburgh White Shorts coming at you with another deck tech. Today I'm joined by Tyler.
What's up?
And we are going to be going over the new big meta threat deck. 8 Standby Nino, the new Quints stuff. Quints came out, I believe, last week in English, right? Pretty recently.
Yeah, it came out the 19th or something like that, whatever that last Friday was.
Tyler has definitely played this deck a lot more than that, though. He definitely has played the Japanese version of the List Into the Ground. I've played it quite a bit myself. I also had it in JP. Not as long or played as often as Tyler, though. He's definitely the expert. But now coming to English, it's unrestricted, right? Play English and dodge that ban list.
Until after, we'll see if it dodges the ban list like Mushoku did, so.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, well, here is the list. Like always, we'll have the link in the description to Encore decks, but if you're just here for the list, leave us a like on the way out. Really helps us out. But yeah, pretty standard. If you're familiar with the list, it's running all the cards that you'd expect. The only big sort of change is the 1/1 lineup, which is based on, what you expect to see, what you shift more towards, or what's one or the other. But we will get into that as we move through the cards. So let's just hop into it. At level 0, we are opting to run the Nino Center Runner, which is if you have another character at 3,500 and then runs the center. So your 3,500 Center Runner profile, really good. Even if you have to just throw another level 0 down on the field, if you don't open a standby or you don't open like a way to push extra triggers to sort of go into a standby, or you're not attacking twice like you're going first, it's still worth it just because of the decks in the meta that exist. 3,500 is like the premium power line right now, and especially if you're in the Mirror or Mushoku, you just want a card that's going to live back to your turn so that you can swing with it again, as opposed to the Chiuri, which is the other sort of build people play at 0, where instead of playing a traditional plussing 0, they treat their 1/1s as plussing 0s, and then use the Chiuri in higher counts, like use somewhere between 2 to 4, and then either play more tech or play heavier on the level 3s. So that is an option, but I think in this meta, and Tyler, I don't know your exact thoughts on it, I think you need the Center Runner.
You need the Center Runner. I think playing the level 1 as your plussing 0 is too sacky.
Yeah, especially with how this deck likes to play the level 0. And we do
it needs to play faster than normal 8 standby decks, so you need the board and not to just crash out your 0s.
Yeah, so you really want that card that's just going to live back and be able to swing again if you go first. And again, even if you just have to slam down a filter and like filter ahead of turn, it's not that bad. Another thing that might seem a little weird for an 8 standby deck, although we've been seeing more Rickies and Clock Pluses in standby decks more recently as standby decks become more tuned and need to have the ability to like play fast or want to level themselves up. We are playing 4 of the new Ichiga Ricky, which is just a normal search Ricky, pay 1, clock yourself, search for a level 1 or lower character on play. But then she also has on play Surveil. So the way that you'll normally sequence those is you'll do the clock plus first, and then you'll Surveil after you plus. So you don't move that card, like, because especially at level 0, you're going to level up anyway. What you put in your clock does not really matter. Maybe when you're at level 1, if you plan on staying at level 1 or a long time, or you ate a lot of damage and you literally don't want to risk taking a climax into clock, you could do the other effect first, but more often than not, you're always going to Ricky and then Surveil, because informing your triggers in a standby deck is far more useful. Also, the fact that you get that Surveil later in the game means this is like a more premium chumper than otherwise, because Surveils get you into more standbys, and standbys get you into a bigger board if you're forced to attack with a small character. So always
also
good.
Just knowing your soul trigger is nice too.
Yeah, being able to set up side attacks in the late game after a 3/2 support comes down is a big part of the deck in the late game, so Surveil is super premium. Moving on, other level 0s, we got the people who play Ruby might be familiar with this. This is Worse Ironwood. James Ironwood is actually a power corrupt version of this Nino, because this Nino, for its first effect, where it's ditch a character draw, you have to ditch a character with Nino in name. So the way you'll typically use this card is you'll usually use the second effect first in this deck, just because you want to confirm like clean trigger on first attack, and then if it is a climax, you can another draw effect to get it, or then set up a choose your trigger on attack or something like that. But the second effect is still ditch any card, you reveal top and salvage a level X or lower, where X is the card that you reveal. You have a lot of good level 0s for utility in this deck that you want to be able to pick up and recur all the time, so even grabbing just another copy of this, or the card next to it, or any of the cards on the slide after this are all really good plays, as well as, being a double filter for all your targets, because, most of your targets are Ninos, especially in the early game. And then you can also use the second effect to ditch Ichiga's to standby as well, because the deck is mostly Nino with a little bit of Ichiga. So.
Yeah, this Zero I think is like the MVP, the hidden MVP of the deck. Just being able to ditch out all your 1/1s or 2/2s on command is just it's so helpful.
These double filters are so gross.
Yeah, and then you get your other Zero utility cards, because even if you hit a climax off the reveal, you get to salvage a Zero. It's a nutty card.
Yeah, really, really good. Also, our typical standby bounce back card. So the bounce back effect on this one is when you play a climax, you bounce this back to your hand, give something 1k, and on attack choose your trigger. So look at up to 2, choose one of them, put them back. If you look at 1, you just put that one back. You can just stop there. So it digs you into triggers, kind of like Twin Drive, but doesn't push as much soul. You have other ways to push soul in this deck. So in this deck specifically, it's pretty much equivalent to like how Mushoku pushes Twin Drives. Its second effect is really good with the 3/2 Nino. Because that 3/2 Nino, when we get to it, we'll talk about it. She has a way to gain the standby trigger despite not being a climax herself, like in any zone, such as when you trigger it. So being able to shuffle back those Ninos to your deck, especially when your deck is small, and give a character a soul, which can set up side attacks and stuff like that, as well as, of course, trigger more standbys. Stacking out lots of standbys in one turn, building a really massive board going into the late game is really, really gross. It's also usable from the front row with our 2/2 Nino, which we'll talk about. All right, lastly here, level 0, 2 of the Ichiga Brainstorm. I'm going to talk about this one last, because I think a lot of people may or may not be confused about this card from what I've seen people talking about Discord, why it's being run. So we'll cover the other 2 first, because they're pretty simple. The Nino self-tap salvage from the first set, it's just a pay 1 self-tap salvage Brainstorm for 4. And then whenever your character gets a reverse, you can give 500 power to a character. So you can sort of roll 500 power. Helps you edge over lanes. And then the Itsuki is a removal card. So you tap it, you choose one of your characters, they get 500 power, and on reverse, you pick that character to clock. Just doesn't do damage, but you remove it from the board. So it removes things with hand encore, removes anything sticky, gets things off a board to lower your opponent's power conditions. Yeah, the mirror, it's gross.
Yeah.
All those Hololive decks that are playing like sticky stuff in the mid game that you want gone, like especially like kicking Kanata to clock, even in that deck where you go like, oh, like Kanata doesn't have hand encore, it doesn't matter. Kicking Kanata to clock, if they try to stay at level 2, is as good as getting rid of it, because then they have to wait a whole turn cycle to get that one back. They don't have level 2 heals. Also has pay 2 tap salvage, which is pretty good as a stock out if you need to pay down 2.
It's actually more useful than you think.
I use that effect a lot.
Yeah, I think for the Brainstorm though, the basic one, that helps a lot at 0. I realized when you're playing against other Quints or other Mushokus that have the 3500 and something else that you can crack over, it's really helpful to just keep your board.
Yeah, that like win by 500 is like really nice.
Yeah, because I've actually had that happen to me a lot in literally the past 2 days while we were at locals.
Yeah, just because, get that little bit of extra edge when you're playing everything with the same power line throughout the tournament. That like little 500 is just as good as any other buff. So getting into the Ichiga. So this card is extremely, extremely good in this deck for a very specific reason. The first of which is this card is a 9-card eject button on a stick that does not take a board slot. So the way that this card is played is you do not put this card on the board and let it sit there like a Brainstorm. When this card is played to the board, you are intending to use both effects. It has 2 act effects, but they might as well be autos. So basically what you'll do is you'll play this down, you'll tap 2 of your characters, you'll Brainstorm for 5, go and get an early play Ichiga or an Ichiga changer, or maybe a back row to filter on a following turn to get into like a grave over deck or something like that, or just grab a Ricky for just a plus, and that if you hit, and then you can pay 1 and sack her to check top 4, add any Quint. So that is a somewhere between, well, I guess it's anything if you don't use the other effect. It's just a modular 1 to 9 card mill, where you're like a little gated on how many cards you can move, but I think actually you're not gated at all. You can move every number between 1 and 9 if you want with the combination of the effect. But if you need to pay 2 stock down to pay something, I'd use them. But the fact that this card moves so many cards plays into, like we talked about, the Nino that bounces back. So we can mill our deck down to very small, shuffle back these 3/2 Ninos, and then go for a crazy standby turn where we play down the finisher Nino standby in the mid game and like trigger a bazillion climaxes. So the fact that and build like a massive board. So the fact that this card is like a 1 card card mill up to 9 that doesn't take a spot in your back row for like standbys and stuff is invaluable, and that's why the card is so good. But I think that's about it. We can just move into the 1/1. They are pretty simple as well. You're playing 2 of the normal 1/1, just the 7500, because 1K1 decks are making a comeback now in English, so we're gonna slant towards 4 of this unreversible Nino. This card is like hella rude. It is a 6/5 all the time if you have 2 or more other characters, and can't be reversed by cost zeros, no matter what. So it can't even be reversed by like red bombs, because those are cost 0. So this card against any 1K1 deck, they cannot clear it until they're level 2, and it just sits there and gives you free pluses forever and deny reverses. Like this card, you like shit it out against Danmachi, and they go like, oh, okay, well, can't do anything about that. Yeah, sometimes depending on the matchup against certain 1K1 decks, specifically Danmachi, it's sometimes better to put this card down than it is to like play your 2/2 Nino, because 2/2 Nino could die. This card will just live forever. It's immortal. So by knowing your matchups, this card can be like super gross.
Yeah, I mean, this card is gross no matter what.
Yeah, against other standby decks, because of the way that you play your level 0, again, we'll get into that when we get to the play guide, you don't really care that you don't have access to 75 1/1s, because you're going to be taking the 0 and like 1 a lot faster, and you use your 2/2 to beat down board as opposed to like your 1/1s to like win on defense. So slanting this way, even with other standby decks being in the meta, namely like MTI, you just really don't care because of the way the 2/2 functions, which I guess we can talk about right now. So we got the 2/2 Wholehearted Maiden Nino combos with the standby. It is a 2/2 7k. If all of your characters are Quints, this card gets 2 abilities during your turn, gets 5k, so 12k based on your turn, 7k off, and then a Hand Encore. As long as you're playing the game, it is an on-turn 12k with Hand Encore all the time. And then during your climax phase, when you play Unstoppable Feelings with the standby here, when this card is brought out to the waiting room from the effect of that standby, and as long as you have 2 or more other characters, you can sacrifice the standby, so the standby immediately goes to grave. Its effect is over. You don't need it anymore. You stand this card immediately, and then this card gets 1,000 extra power cross turn, so it'll be an 8k cross turn swinging at 13. So this is how you're going to crack down your opponent's boards. This card comes down on your first level 1 turn, and then every turn that you are still at 1 and you still have this standby, you continue to put them down, and you continue to kill stuff over and over and over and over again. You just beat down everything all the time. It's a very simple standby strategy, because you do not have to play a slow level 0 into 1 to build your army. Your army is this card, because this card comes down and nukes your opponent's army for you. So you don't really have to like think about taking the game really slow. You just take your early standbys as they come, and then this Nino comes down and just kills stuff constantly, like over and over and over. Tyler, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on it, but
no, that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
you literally slam the climax and you go, I'm going to turn this card sideways.
Yeah, and it just kills everything in front of it.
Yeah,
like, until and like the end.
And then if somehow the opponent can't hit over an 8k cross turn, then you just get a free plus and hit over another thing the next turn.
Yeah, it's like 8k against the 1k1 decks like might be enough to live.
Yeah.
So like, if it lives, sure, you're happy. If it doesn't, you don't care. You like pitch something and you just keep it up and go again. And you just keep up the pressure. Because you're like, again, it's an 8 standby deck that outside of its one like level 2 nut turn, doesn't really play like a standby deck. You play it more like a 1k1 deck. But I think a lot of people who don't typically like the standby gameplay loop will probably like 8 standby Quints.
Yeah, it still has an 8 standby feel to it, but it is definitely not the traditional 8 standbys.
Not in the early game for sure. It gets more standby as the game goes on.
Yeah, once you hit like 2, 3, then it becomes a lot more just basic standby. But 0 and 1 is a lot more like I guess a 1k1.
Rounding out level 2, we are choosing to play the memory kick counter. There's the yellow one, which actually Tyler reminded me existed, since not playing the Icy Tail off finisher in this deck, which is blue. But there's also a blue memory kick counter. They do the same thing, same card. Neither of them are like Ichiga or Nino, so there's no like benefit or like bad thing to playing either one, so it's just color. So play the one that fits what you're playing. If you decide to play the Icy Tail, obviously play the 2/1. Even in this list, if you have to play the 1/1s from hand, you still have 8, so not a big deal. And then only 2 bracelet, which is the defensive minus soul counter. As this deck like went onwards and was refined and refined and refined, the bracelet was shown to be not the like craziest thing about the deck, but more of like a feather in its cap. And you actually push so many extra draws with the Nino filter that 2 is enough to like get the one that you'll play in pretty much every game. But if you like the bracelet a lot and you like that safety net, you can make space for a third. But two has been more than enough, at least in my testing. Moving in to level 3, we will talk about the Nino combo. So again, if you have this standby in your climax zone, this card gets the standby trigger in all zones. So when you trigger it, even though this card is not a climax, you will get the standby effect, and you still get a soul because it is level 3. That is why people call this deck 12 standby, because you are getting 4 extra triggers every time you play this climax, this specific one. During your turn, as long as you have 2 or more other characters, this gets 4k, so it's 12-5 base on turn, keeping in that theme of these Ninos being big on turn as opposed to being big cross turn. And then on play heal, pretty good. And then a really efficient finishing effect. End of attack, pay 1, ditch 1, as long as you have 2 or more other characters, burn 3. That is like really good hyper efficient numbers. Deep cost, good numbers, healer, like pretty non-offensive for you to do in the mid game. If you get copies of this out at 2, you can just like do a single copy of your finisher while like building your board. It's like not that big of a deal. Combo's definitely super good, but obviously the crazy part about it is that first line of text. The fact that when we shuffle these back in at the end of like, you know, our first deck, if we're at level 2, we can shuffle 2 of these back in, have you know, a 3 card deck or a 4 card deck, have the standby come down using our like choose your trigger, basically confirm hitting 3 standbys out to board that turn, which is pretty gross. So just being able to instantly build that board all in one turn and then ride that out the rest of the game is really powerful. And then, like, you know, it's a great card to throw in the back row when you hit standbys because it's big on your turn, right? Not on your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
You don't really care about folding in your front row really at any point. You don't want to from level 2 and onwards, but the fact that this is going to come down so big on the following turn. We do have ways to like play this from our hand at 2 as a healer as well, so it's just like even better. This card's like extremely good. Everything you want in like a standby finisher card.
Yeah, the only thing that I could think of is that if the game runs too fast and you get hit up to 3 really quick and you couldn't get like the Ichiga back row for the additional 2k support, 12-5 is probably potentially not big enough for a memory kick counter, so that's something you have to be aware of.
Because it has to make it to the end of its attack.
Yeah.
But you do have to play the standby to get the combo, so hopefully you'll be able to get that Ichiga down if you need it.
It's not
that
too
plus the
hard.
bounce,
Yeah.
So, but it could come up, It does have to make it to the end of its attack, so it is susceptible to all those things. But it doesn't need the reverse, so whatever.
Yeah.
Alright, moving on to other level 3s. We got a lot of them, our standby deck. 2 of the early play Ichiga from set 1, so 2 or less, 500 power for each other, so 11k. Discard a card, heal to stock. Really good mid-game healer in colors that we're playing. It's also an Ichiga, so we can pick it up off our brainstorm, or, you know, like anything else throughout the game, but it is something we can grab. Another Ichiga we play is this 3-2 changer. This card's actually super sick. So it is a 3-2-9-5. It has act, A2 tap this burn 1, which is cool to just pay out stock if we put this on the field with a standby. And then it has this awesome change effect. At the beginning of your climax phase, return this card to your hand, choose any Quints character in your hand, put it in the stage position this card was on without paying for it. So this is how we can advance summon our finisher from hand at 2 and get a heal. As well as, you know, we standby this to the previous turn. We can then put that Nino in the front row, and if we play a standby from hand, then we have combo, you know? So like you do have to play into this card for this card to be super effective, but when you do, it can be really nasty, especially with just the main phase burn. That can come up a lot. It's a lot nastier than you might think, even for that cost.
Yeah, the main phase burn is actually, in my opinion, even better than the change effect, and the change effect is really good.
You do have to play into it. You have to be like very conscious of this card, because if you just try to like play this as like a card that's in your deck, and if like you stand by it or whatever, it's gonna seem pretty underwhelming. But if you prioritize it and like go for lines that involve like, okay, I'm gonna stand by out the Ichiga because I have the Nino in my hand, I'm gonna hold the Nino, then I'm gonna change it to the Nino, and I'm gonna get the heal. It's really strong because you're just getting free heals at that point, because triggered the standby, that card was free, you changed into it from hand, this card came back, that was also free, it's free heal.
Yeah, you can also heal with the Ichiga too and just heal to stock.
Yeah, you can go stock positive for
but I don't
-1 hand.
believe, do you need color requirement for
No.
changing into that?
No, you do not. You do not need
Okay.
color requirement. Yeah. So if you've somehow gotten screwed out of yellow, you can use this to change the Ichiga.
So yeah, you got ways of healing at 2.
Last level 3s here. The Ichiga support. This card is like really important for this deck. This card's super insane. It's your typical 2k in front support. When you play it, it's another healer. So if you have to play this from hand, like with the Ichiga change or something like that, like you want to get this down down at 2 or something like that, and you get a heal out of it as well. And up to 3 times per turn, when a character is summoned to the stage from your waiting room, give any of your characters a soul. Up to 3 times per turn. So this lets you soul to your board from level 2 onwards after it's down, as well as set up really nasty side attacks in the end game to either play around your opponent's defensive counters or just set up exacties for lethal. This card is like super crazy. It's very sneaky how good that is, but like when you play with it, it's after the first time you have it down, it's instantly like realize how strong it can be. Simple but strong. And then we got the Nino. Only one of this one. You can really play with the level 3 ratios however you want. I wouldn't play less than 2 of the Ichiga support, but you can move the other stuff around if you'd like to make space for more copies of this. This is your typical, if it's in center stage, all of your characters get 1500 power, so it's one of those, like the card that you stand by to the front row on successive standbys after your first attack. And then whenever you play a standby from your hand, only when you play one from hand, you can get to top check 2, rearrange them, and give a character another instance of that on attack. Look at top 2, up to top 2, pick one, mill the other. So just a way after it's down to give your board a little bit more oomph, as well as push some more triggers to build an even bigger board. In my experience, it's always been a little underwhelming because the card is even slower than other cards of its ilk. Like, it really has no benefit when played from hand at all outside of its power. And the way that, again, that you're going to play that nut turn where you shuffle those Ninos in, go for multiple triggers, you are typically going to have your entire grave available to you. So if you are able to get this card on the board, those are the times it's going to happen. So instead of running more copies of it, we're just only going to run one, because if the stars align and we get that crazy nut turn, that's when this card's going to come down, because that's when it's going to be most effective. It's sort of just how I've always played it. Tyler, I don't know if you've had any different experiences with this one, but...
No, sometimes I just go, okay, because sometimes there are decks that I play against that have bigger thresholds than 12,000, which the 2/2 can't hit over. Mm-hmm. So being able to somehow play around with both of these cards just helps additionally. I don't think that the top 2 rearrange happens as much as you think. Because,
yeah, almost never, yeah.
Like, if it was trigger, it would be a lot better, but it's play, so...
Only really, on the finisher turn, right, after this card has sat around forever. Which, you know, it's
exactly.
Nice. It's nice when that happens, because you get a lot of trigger knowledge.
1500 is definitely what you use the card for, but then the additional standby is just a bonus effect, like the choose your trigger.
All right, that is the whole list again. And before we get out of here, again, we have a brief play guide. Gonna start doing these a little bit more for most of the decks we put out here that people really care about. I think this kind of stuff's important, especially for, you know, if you're familiar with standby and you pick this up and you're like me and you're like, deck seems kind of underwhelming, and then someone goes, are you trying to like play slow? And then you go, oh, I'm stupid, and the deck starts working. So little stuff like this. So basically, step 1, you're gonna play that level 0, that early game, more like a traditional 1k1 deck. Don't like play for the standbys that don't like come to you. Like, if you open like the other standby and you already have the standby for your level 1, like to summon the 2/2, like, and you have a 1/1 in the grave, yeah, sure, slam it, like, you know, stuff like that. Or if you trigger them, put the cards out, but you're not gonna like try to grind the 0 to a halt to, you know, build a big army, because, you know, your 2/2 Nino's small off turn, you generate value by attacking with it on its first turn. So there's really no point for you to take that level 0 game very slowly. So you're just gonna play it more traditionally, use your Rickies, grab your cards, get filters, set up your grave, like put all the 2/2s that come to your hand into your grave so that you can get extra if you trigger standbys outside of the one you're gonna play, and get your 1/1s if you can. The second you hit level 2, get that 2/2 down and kill stuff. Keep killing stuff every turn that you're still at 1. And, you know, you're gonna try to stay on your first deck, actually, instead of trying to mill out at 1 with like clock compression, which, you know, you can take it if it happens, but you typically want to get to level 2 on first deck so that you can get that small deck, mill down to that small deck even easier, so you don't have to use a lot of resources to get there. Shuffle back in, do 3/2 Ninos, play the Nino standby, and then in that one turn, you are going to generate a massive board that your opponent is going to have to tear their hair out to deal with, that you got for, you know, losing no compression because you triggered standbys that were not climaxes. You know, you triggered those 3/2s, those weren't climaxes, but you still got the standby value, and, you know, you're at the bottom of your deck, so you're going to refresh, you're going to have a massive board, and you didn't sacrifice compression to build it, which is really cool. And you're going to ride that out like pretty much for the rest of the game. Use the bracelet if you don't want to take damage. damage. If your opponent says 3 and you think you might eat the 3 and you don't want to eat the 3, play the bracelet. That's that easy. Keep putting down stuff, building up your board for level 3. This is where you can make your Ichiga changer plays if you want. You pay stuff out, you use burn ability. Obviously, at this point in the game, we want to have our 3-2 Ichiga down. That's we're going to use that to sort of pump over stuff with soul if we side attacks, or just push for damage, get ahead. And then when you're ready, you just end the game with a 3-2 Nino climax combo because it uses almost no resources. You play it down, you get a heal, you kill your opponent with it. Or you can take the game slow if you have more bracelets. Do whatever you want. And again, always remember you have the Ichiga for side attacks or exact damage, stuff like that, to help you close out the game. Any other thoughts on the gameplay loop of the deck, Tyler?
No, you got all that. It's a pretty simple deck once you play it a few times.
Yeah, the gameplay loop is not difficult.
Yeah, it runs itself.
Yeah, for the most part. The only time you gotta put forth a lot of effort is when you're setting up for that level 2 standby turn. That's when you gotta be on top of your mechanics. But outside of that, if you're not going for the Ichiga change stuff, you just let it roll.
Yep. I think 0, 1, and sometimes even 3 are the easiest levels. 2's sometimes the hardest.
Yeah, because you just want to elongate the game as much as possible and make sure you set yourself up for to sack, basically. You set yourself up for the best opportunity to get the biggest board. Yeah,
get the best compression, get the biggest board without throwing away all your climaxes.
Burning everything.
Yeah.
But yep, usual last slide. Card games competitive. We don't own or operate them, but we are active in them. You want to talk about Weiss, get some webcam games, or maybe play on Weiss Fight with people in voice chat. Definitely give those a look. Global and NA, you want to buy, sell, and trade cards. Definitely give that a look. There are also JP translations from the Smith sets posted to Global, and those are also copy pasted into the Discord. So you have ways to have your finger on the Weiss heartbeat of the community, no matter whether you're quarter face. Pick your poison. And if you'd like to try this deck, and you don't have your cards in yet, you're still waiting for them to come in the mail, or you're waiting for stuff to come into your LGS or something like that, you can give Weiss Fight a look. Play Weiss right in your browser with people from all over the world. No need to download anything or anything like that. You just grab our link from Encore decks, shove it in there, or any deck you make on Encore, generate the list, and you're playing with people from all over the world in your browser instantaneously. Definitely give that a look. Upcoming content, Attack on Titan set review. We might do something interesting for that. We were thinking about maybe doing a live stream or something, since people are really big on it, and a ton of people who are excited for it. Might make it a big thing. They didn't announce anything else, right? It's just Avatar and Seven Deadly Sins that we do nothing about, basically.
I think that's it.
Yeah. In terms of BCSs that we're going to be at Chicago and Toronto are the ones that we're looking at, where we'll have a pretty big presence. Unfortunately, Houston's too early, and Georgia, the venue's too far from the airport, really. It's just far enough to be hard to get to, so we had to pass on that, even though it's quote-unquote free for Labor Day weekend. It was a little bit hard to get that transportation stuff figured out, so we decided to pass on it. But Chicago and Toronto are the ones that we are expecting to be at in force, with a big part of the Pittsburgh scene. So if you're there, definitely seek us out. It's always cool to meet people who are fans of the content. And thank you all for 1,400 subs. Never thought we'd be this far. It surprises me every time it goes up. I'm like, damn, people do really like it. Yeah, it's people watch it, people like it. So yeah, we love making it, so we're just gonna keep doing it. That's why we did it in the first place. We love making content. We love giving back to the community for the game we love. So we're just gonna keep on keeping on. We're glad you guys enjoy it. But with that, I think we're good. Tyler, got anything to add on the way out?
No, not really.
All right. With that, Pittsburgh White Sports signing off. We'll see you guys in the next one.